mean, I know how beloved Bruce is, and I was nervous about portraying someone who's just as like known, and his relationship to his audience and his fans are so it's so kind of like pure and intimate and personal, and I didn't want to interrupt that. But it was very important to Bruce, and to Bruce's credit, you know, he wanted to show this version of himself.
Yes.
He chose this time and the movie to be made about this time for a reason. So that took a lot of bravery,
Yeah.
and so I felt confident knowing that he was behind it and behind me, I suppose.
No, put Born USA on the shelf. I want this record to feel different.
The label, once you have your first top 10, they want 3 for the next.
Just trying to break a little new ground. I'm not making a record, Mikey. Don't need to be perfect. I just want it to feel right.
Our man's on a rocket ship, and we don't want to miss that window. Radio can't play this.
In this office, my office, we believe in Bruce Springsteen.
What was your first interaction with Bruce?
Yeah.
How did you find his music? And later, when you met him, what was that moment like?
Yeah, I mean, you know, so I grew up close to here. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, in the early 90s. And so Bruce was a fixture already. Like, I can't remember a time when I didn't know his name, when I didn't know his, like, silhouette face, and when I didn't know his kind of, like, radio music, you know? So I have an idea of Bruce as far back as I can think. I think in my early 20s, I did more of a like study of Bruce as an artist. That was the first time I listened to the album, Nebraska, and I found it through friends of mine who were musicians, and they were interested in it not just because of its beautiful like lyricism and its storytelling, but for kind of the story that we're telling, which is, you know, today a lot of musicians, they can record music in their hotel rooms or their homes or their bedrooms, but at the time it was a pretty far out concept to make this kind of record so on your own, and you can really hear the intimacy in that record. And then the Bruce I met, and the first time that we, you know, got together was in London. I was invited to go see a show at Wembley. I was invited to sound check, and so I was in the pit kind of alone and watching, you know, Bruce on stage, and then he stopped and he saw me, and he pulled me up on stage, and our first interaction was center stage at Wembley Stadium, and we got into it right away. I mean, I went back to his dressing room and I got to ask him about why this story, why this time, and he was immediately very like honest and forthcoming about his experience during this time and just generally, and he remained very generous throughout the process.
You mentioned that you never not knew about Bruce.
Yeah.
So when was the moment where you intersected with him when you were prepping to play him?
Well, one of the first ones was actually, you know, I'll go a little further. When I was speaking to him, when I met him in London, I asked him, you know, you go on this journey with your friend Matt D'Elia, you're kind of running away to California thinking, you know, maybe you can get away from yourself a little bit and that's going to solve your problems. And I asked him about the county fair and, you know, that sort of panic that set in. And I said, well, what was that? You know, what was that about? And he said, you know, I felt like I was an observer in my own life. I felt like I was on the outside looking in, and that was really scary. And that was a feeling that I was familiar with, and even at that particular time 2 summers ago, was something I felt like I was contending with, and that was the first time where I went, oh, maybe my perspective on this story and this man, you know, maybe I do have something to say here. Maybe there's something in my toolbox that's like of value here. And that became this kind of like tether that connected us that he didn't know about yet, but I was aware of, and that became kind of my way in.
And one of the things that I love the most about the movie is just that it's almost like a deconstruction of the myth, the idol. Did you ever feel pressure of the fans not wanting to see their hero as flawed or fragile, or was that something that was ever going through your mind as you were
Yeah, I mean,
working in
in
this?
the beginning, I definitely, I mean, I know how beloved Bruce is, and I was nervous about portraying someone who's just as like known, and his relationship to his audience and his fans are so, it's so kind of like pure and intimate and personal, and I didn't want to interrupt that. But it was very important to Bruce, and to Bruce's credit, he wanted to show this version of himself.
Yes.
He chose this time and the movie to be made about this time for a reason. So that took a lot of bravery, and so I felt confident knowing that he was behind it and behind me, I suppose.
Absolutely. You and Jeremy Strong, who plays John Landau, you have such incredible moments. One of my favorites is when you
Thanks.
guys are sitting on the bedroom floor and
Yes.
listening to music, but also
Yeah.
the hug as you come off stage.
Yeah.
There's a palpable rhythm to their dynamic. How did you and Jeremy come to understand John and Bruce's bond?
Yeah, I mean, that's been well documented,
Yeah.
and it was such an important part of this particular story, and Scott highlighted it so beautifully in the script, and that was one of the things I was most excited about in approaching the work. A lot of it was, portraying this genius that is Bruce during this very sensitive period in his life. A lot of it was the father and son relationship. A lot of it was being welcomed in the creative process of this genius writer. And then a big one is this like loving relationship between these two men and loyalty between these two men. And I've been a fan of Jeremy's for a very long time. I know how capable he is, and there was just a lot of trust that was necessary to know that we were showing up, that we'd done our work, and that we would need to like lean on one another. And that happened very naturally. There wasn't much discussion between Jeremy and I. Everything kind of just fell into place, and I just count myself as lucky for that.
You mentioned you played a genius, and he very much is, but you seem to gravitate towards haunted geniuses. You play characters that their creativity is kind of tied to their suffering and their mental health and
Sure.
all of that. What is it about this that really pulls you in and makes you want to play these characters and these people?
Yeah, I think these men, I wouldn't call Bruce a lonely man, but I think this is a lonely period, in his life. And I think a lot of the other characters I've played are lonely, and they have, their artistry that they feel very, very strongly, about, and they feel very like focused and present in. But outside of that, they have a hard time. And I always find those stories very compelling. I mean, I think some of the best like film and artistry is about belonging, or the feeling of not belonging. The feeling of family and finding family, whether that be of blood or otherwise. So I don't know. Those stories have always been of interest to me. The story of belonging and finding purpose. I just think that's a human story and a global story. That's like something that's familiar and can connect to everyone.
Absolutely. So without giving too much away, there's a moment at the end of the film where it's between Bruce and his father. And what impacted me is there's a breakthrough for them, but it's almost like you're going backwards and you're going back into his childhood vulnerability, and he is really processing his trauma and just dealing with a lot of that. Could you take me behind the scenes of the moment? How did you and Steven and Scott Coper build that dynamic, and was Bruce present for any of it? Did he watch you guys playing that scene in particular?
Yeah, Bruce was there that day. Yeah.
Lovely.
So there was a lot of responsibility, and a lot of weight, regardless of Bruce being there or not. I mean, that certainly added to it, but I think we knew how important that moment was. That's a real thing that happened with Bruce and his father. I think I knew what that scene was about, or what I think it's about is making, space. It's ultimately about forgiveness and seeing past faults. And that day on set was a heavy day. There was a lot going on in Scott's life and all of our lives. It was very close to the end of filming. We were all very exhausted, and yeah, there was a heaviness in the room, but an excitement. I think we could all see the light at the end of the tunnel. And but yeah, no, there was no discussion with Steven and I. We knew I think we knew what it was.
Yeah.
He's such a great performer. You know, I was never concerned. I didn't think like we had to speak about it. That all fell into place in a really nice way.
Baby, we were